Welcome to the Mirth Connect User Group webinar series. These webinars will all be based on Mirth Connect related topics, and today we will cover the Mirth Connect installation on SinOS with Postgres as a backend database. Our agenda for the day will be our Mirth Connect User Group disclaimer. We're going to then update CentOS. We're going to install Postgres. We'll move into the Open JDK, which is the Java component that's required for Mirth Connect to function. We'll do a complete installation of Mirth Connect. We'll then install the PGAdmin component. We will do basic troubleshooting if you run into any problems, and then we'll cover any questions that anyone might have. We've got I know some folks on this call, so there's some pretty good Linux experts on the call, so we may have to troubleshoot with the team. And then we're going to take questions at the end of the call. So with that, Mirth is a registered trademark of Nextgen Healthcare. The Mirth Connect User Group is in no way affiliated with Nextgen Healthcare. And please feel free to speak up if you have any problems with this video. Everyone should see a command line to a server at the top of the screen. If you do not see that, please speak up now or forever hold your peace. So this is a new installation of SinOS. SinOS is one distribution of the Linux platform. There are other distributions. There's Ubuntu and Fedora, SinOS, Red Hat, but SinOS is the Red Hat version of the OSS of essentially Mirth, their distribution of their OSS software, and similar to what Mirth Connect or Nextgen does with Mirth Connect. So they have Mirth Connect, the open source version, and then they have the proprietary version, which has the plugins and the appliance and the wrappers. So with SinOS, some of the commands that I'll use will be slightly different. If you use, say, Fedora or some other distribution, maybe even like a Raspberry Pi, or you use Ubuntu. I have an Ubuntu machine here. Commands are slightly different. I'm also, disclaimer, I'm going to run this as root because after I'm done with this demo, I'm going to destroy this box. And that's just going to save us some time, so I'd suggest that you run it that you create a user and run it as a user. I usually do it as Mirth and then install the service as root. So with that, the very first thing that I do is I run yum update. And that's just, and yum is the a derivative of the RPM system, which is a package installer. And there's a yum database, so you can do a lot of updates using yum. And I generally use it. You may be familiar with apt-get, which is another installer. With SinOS, you use yum. So what I'm doing is updating the operating system right now. You can see it's SinOS 7, and it's running through the update. This is going to take a couple minutes to do this update. I've got 2 hours for this implementation, and I wanted to show you everything that we may run into. So I'm going to actually do these updates. Along those lines, while we're waiting to do this update, questions, concerns, comments about what we're doing at present or the reasons why. Okay, so as the update is running, after we're done with the update of the operating system, and I run the update, after we're done, we're going to do some installations of some different products that we're going to need. We're going to start with the Open JDK that Mirth uses, and we'll need that. And we're also going to install Postgres. So we'll need that as well, and then we'll move into the Mirth Connect implementation. So the key is we're running Mirth Connect against a Postgres database, so that's going to require Postgres to be installed, as well as any updates to Postgres. And then lastly would add, as we go through this update, this is the first thing that I do when I do a new install like this, and then this is also the last thing that I do, because as we go through the install, and it's probably more just a personal thing, but I like to bring everything down and do another update, just to make sure that there was something that we didn't bring in or implement during the installation process that needed to be updated. So I'll come back and check all the dependencies and do another update using Yum. So with that, we're going through the cleanup now. Some other challenges that I've run through with some of these installs has primarily been centered around the configuration file that I'm going to show you with Mirth Connect, and the connectivity. So I'll show you some of that stuff actually while this is running. So what I'm doing here is installing Open JDK version 1.8, which is going to fit with the version of the system that we're running. It went through any dependencies. It's telling me now that total download size is 38 meg, installed size is 121 meg, so that's the compressed, that's uncompressed. It's asking me, is this okay to install this? And I'm saying yes. So now it's running through and doing the install. It's actually running, it's going to run pretty quickly. So some notes about the JDK. Sun originally had the Open JDK, or the JDK, and Sun was acquired by Oracle, and Oracle is moving away from the JDK, and they're pushing for the open source JDK, which is referred to as Open JDK, and I think they're even going to discontinue the work with Java at some point in the near future. So you need to make note of that if you work in Java, and also be aware that Amazon is recently out that Amazon is going to release a version of the JDK that's going to be based on the Open JDK and also make it available. So that is coming soon. So be aware of that, as most of us are developers. That will definitely impact what we're using, particularly if you use Amazon or Amazon services. I don't know how they will implement that or what the installation procedures will be, but I've heard that the Amazon's version will be open source, and it will be available, and it is a derivative of Open JDK. Okay, so we've got the JDK installed now, and now we're ready to install the Postgres. So what I found with Postgres, and what I've had with Postgres, is a problem getting Postgres to install with Yum. So I usually run an RPM with this. So this is gonna pull the Postgres down into the Yum database. And normally I will be copy pasting this stuff, but for everyone on the phone, I just wanted to do it. Okay, that should get it. Let's hope. Make sure that there's no typos in here. There is a typo. Someone should have spoke up right here. All right, so I've got that 7 686. So this is going to install. Hey Sam, this is going to install. This is going to update the Yum database, and then I'll run a Yum install when this is done. So this is Postgres 10. Yeah. So what's happened is it's updated the Yum database. It's pulled SinOS down. So now the Yum database is complete, and I would not have been able to run this command without doing this. So now I'm going to do a Yum install Postgres SQL 10-server, and then Postgres. This is 2 packages. So this is the client and the server. All right. So let's just go through to make sure that everyone's clear on what I'm doing. We're now installing the database, and this is the database that Mirth will use. It's all in now and installed. So we're using Postgres 10. We are installing this 2 packages, the client, and you noticed in the Yum command that I used, I typed in there were 2 components, which was the server as well as the client tools. So here you go. We've done the Postgres install, but also keep in mind the Postgres has a command line tool, but it's kind of hard to use. So I normally use the PGAdmin, which is a client tool that is installed on the desktop, and you can see I have it right here. You're going to need that to work with this system, or at least I need it, and you can use the pSQL command line tools, but that's really hard to use and antiquated, and the PGAdmin provides a GUI tool. So we're gonna I'm gonna ask that you guys, as you work through this, you install PGAdmin on whatever version of the operating system that you have. It's PGAdmin 4. And you will need that tool, and I'll show you how to set that up to connect to Postgres. And the by default and out of the box, it's not going to allow connectivity to the system. And by that I mean you can't connect to from PGAdmin into Postgres, nor can you do any of the connectivity or connections from external sources, including Mirth. So, and that's one of the problems that I ran into early on with this, and one of the reasons that we decided to do this material is all the problems that I ran into with Postgres. So when you get Postgres installed, you want to cd to var lib, and you can hit tab here, lib, and then in there you're going to see a PGSQL setup, and then I'm going to do a netdb. That may be the command I missed. There we go. So that moves the base Postgres database into place. So now I should see the database in that I wasn't seeing earlier under the data folder, and then I'm going to run a few more commands. And now what this does is it will on boot up start Postgres. So you do a systemctl start Postgres SQL -10.service. All right, so that just, then I'm going to do a systemctl enable. So I'm saying start it on boot. All right, there we go. And that command worked. And then I'm going to do a service Postgres SQL -10. All right. Then let's just check to make sure it's running. Yep. So notice here it's running. And then another thing that I like to do, oh, and then one other thing, I'm going to add a check config Postgres SQL -10, and then I'm going to say on. All right. Now, something that I like to do when I'm done with this is I should see at this point Postgres listening on port 5432. So what this does is it's saying, show me all the ports that are open. And you notice here, Postgres is now listening on port 5432. So it's up and running. Now, the other quirkiness about Postgres is that it does not have by default a user that it creates for the database. It actually is controlled by the operating system initially. So what you have to do is you do an SU with switch user minus Postgres. So it creates an account called Postgres. And then I'm going to say the command that I'm going to issue is psql. All right, so I'm saying log in as Postgres, issue this command. And what you should see at this point is everything worked right. You should see the Postgres command line. There you go. So this is the Postgres command line. Now, if you want to quit out of the Postgres command line, you can do a Q, and you're going back to where you were. Now, what's this? If I do a SU minus Postgres and I don't issue the command, I'm at a bash as Postgres, the user. I can also just issue the command psql. And I am back to the Postgres command line. If you want to get out of that, \Q. So that just is further confirmation that Postgres is up and working. So we've got that done. All right, so, and then out of the box, Postgres does not allow access into the system, and so you have to make a few more changes to tell it, hey, I want access, or to allow access. All right, so these are the configuration files here. And I know I'm typing really quick. I'm going to do a PWD so you can see the folder that I'm in. I'm in var live, PGSQL 10 data folder. So when I ran that initdb earlier, it actually sent me here. Now if I do an ls, which is a list, everything that's in that folder, you see all the files. The two files that I really care about is is this one and this one. Those are the two files I care about. Now, a couple of things about those two files, and most particularly this one. What you're going to get out of the box is the Postgres SQL with generic parameters set in it. And from experience, those parameters are not adequate to run Mirth Connect and to especially if you're in production. So what you need to do, and that is probably a webinar for another day, is understand what these commands do. There's some primers out there on the web, and tweak this configuration file so that it fits with your particular installation. I'm going to go through some of those so you can see what I'm talking about in a minute. Right now I'm going to vi pg_hpa, which is the access, and a lot of stuff here. What I care about is this section. So what I'm going to do is add under the IPv4, I'm going to say host, no SSL. Now, why do you say no SSL? Because this is all secure connections. If you're going to do connections over the web, then you probably need to use SSL to allow for that. But all of my connections are over VPNs, and so I don't need to encrypt that traffic as it flows between my client and between the server, or either I'm running PGAdmin from the server. That traffic, and from my view, is not required to be secured. But so when I say no SSL, I'm saying don't encrypt it, or don't encrypt any queries that I enter between my system and this system. All right, so I'm going to say all, and then I'm going to add. I'm going to say for the purposes of this discussion, I'm just going to say everything. All right. So, and then the last thing, and notice here, I've got the columns. I've got type. I'm saying host no SSL, database all, user all. That's my IP address, and this means everything. All right, and then let me just add another tab here because that should line up here. All right, and I'm going to say here, use MD5. What does that mean? That means that's the password encryption. So I'm saying use the password, just the standard Postgres password that the operating system uses. All right, so that's the change there that you're going to need. Without that, you're not going to be able to access the system. Now notice here, what this is saying is I'm using the /32. That's a single node. So that's saying give me from the server access to 32, which is that subnet group, which would be just that node alone. So that's what this command does. This command is give me access from anywhere. If you were going to use if you were going to have, say, access from a single node, you would put your node address, your IP address in here, whatever that may be, and you can then enter the subnet group for that, or the subnet mask, which is, could be, /24, /16, or in my case /32. I'm going to show you a good example of that over here. So this is the, see if I don't have, I'm not sure that I have this installed on the server. Yep, I do. All right, so this is a production server. And you notice here, you scroll down, I'm saying the same command, give me access from localhost, just that node, and then this is saying give me access, and this is to a firewall, and that's saying to that node. So this is effectively saying through the VPN only. Important file. Without this, and I spent several hours troubleshooting this, if you don't get that right, you're not going to be able to connect. And the next command, or next file I need to edit is the, move this down here. I'll save that, and then I'm going to edit PostgreSQL. Lots of things to change to edit it in this file, and I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like over here. So if you look at some of the changes we've made in this file, some default changes. Okay, so you can see here I'm listening. I can listen on any address. So I'm saying listen on all addresses, not just so accept connections everywhere. Star. That's what this command is, and I'm going to add that. Here you can see, for instance, the listen port is 5432. That's the default for Postgres. It could be other. It could be any port, but that's normally the port that's used. I'll show you some more changes here. Like right here, I know that I can change shared buffers. It was set to maybe a quarter of that by default. So you notice here I made some changes. So I'm just going through letting you know that what is the default load is not the load you want to use. So don't run with that in production. So with that, I'm now back on my .set177 node, and I'm going to go down to listen, and I'm going to enter the command listen, or this is a config. This is a an option. Listen addresses equal. I'm going to say listen from everywhere. All right. And then I'm going to save that file. All right. So without those two changes, you're just not going to be able to get to the database, and that's a problem. Then there's another challenge with connectivity that I'll show you as well. All right. So we've now got Postgres up and working. We've made configuration changes, and we're now ready to. Someone trying to join. Hello, Josh. All right, so we've made some, and just as we had a few join in a few minutes, I want to let everyone know, and I'll reiterate, this is being recorded, and it is going to go up on YouTube. So just heads up there. So we went through the Postgres. We've changed the, we've updated the system. We've installed Postgres. We've changed the configuration with Postgres by changing the PGHBA.conf file as well as the PostgreSQL.conf file. Without that, you're not going to be able to get to a port 5432. And then from there, you would restart the Postgres service, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to go forward and with an SELinux discussion, because we're going to have to make some changes there as well. So let's talk about SELinux. And SELinux is a enhanced security package that Red Hat added to CentOS, and I think it's in version 6 or 7, that was developed by the NSA. And it is a very secure package, almost to the point of, it requires a lot of modifications. Hello, John. All right, so it requires a lot of modifications to the operating system, and for the most part, I'm going to run Mirth Connect behind the firewall anyway, and I don't really need the firewall or enhanced security on my server, because I'm going to encrypt my data at rest. I'm going to have connections, secure connections over, and I'm behind the firewall. I'm not in DMZ. If I'm going to be front-facing to the internet, I'm going to have a proxy Mirth Connect server that will act as the proxy, and there I'll harden that appliance instead of what runs behind the firewall. So for the purposes of this discussion, I'll say SELinux is overkill for what we're doing with Mirth Connect. So with that, and SELinux also is a real pain, and it causes a lot of problems with connectivity, and it can be rather difficult to work with. So I'm gonna turn it off, and I'm going to cd to the XC SELinux folder. So that's where I'm at now. And then I'm going to ls there, and you'll notice there's a config folder here. I'm sorry, file. I'm going to VI that file, and then you notice in that folder or in that file I have three options here. I've got enforcing, I've got permissive, and I've got disabled. And that's what I'm going to do, is disable it. What I generally do when I edit these config files, a general rule of thumb for me is I do a comment instead of actually changing the line itself. So if I ever want to go back, I have the option of doing that. And yes, I do use VI. I know that's old school. So I've got this command option here enabled here. Any questions on that? All right, and then if you look, one other command that's interesting with SELinux is you can do an SE status, if I could type, and you notice here it tells you it's enabled, but I don't want that. So what I'm going to do now, shut down the server, which is required when you disable this. I'm going to say restart that server and say do it now. All right, and then it's actually rebooting as we speak, and it doesn't take long for this box to come back online. So any questions, concerns, comments about the installation of Postgres or the disabling of SELinux while we're waiting for this server to reboot? Please feel free. Thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy said it makes sense so far. Oh, and Sam mentioned there's a command to disable SELinux without having to reboot. Well, that's good. I'll need to do some research there. So just heads up, everyone. There is a command that will allow us to do this without rebooting. I wasn't able to do that, but so we're gonna wait until this system comes back online. So I'm going to grab this file. Notice here we're installing Mirth Connect 3.6.2. And it's pulling it down from the downloads folder, which Mirth makes available. Well, actually Nextgen makes available. And while we're doing that, it's pulling this file down. Okay, so told you it was a bare bones install, so it is. So it doesn't have wget, so I'm going to grab it. So now I have wget, so now this command should work. So you see this is bare bones install. I have nothing on this box. Here we go. All right, so as a disclaimer, you know, the Mirth Connect User Group is not in any way affiliated with Mirth or Nextgen, or supported by Mirth or Nextgen. So I just wanted to get that out there. Mirth is a registered trademark of Nextgen, and we use that under the open source license to reference the open source software. This is in no way affiliated with Nextgen, so just please be aware of that. So now we've pulled down the Mirth Connect box, or the Mirth Connect server, onto this box. So keep in mind, in ls, what that wget does, for those of you that are not familiar, is it just pulls the whatever file that we reference in the wget command. So we're referencing this shell file, and I don't like to use the RPM. I use the shell file. I just find it easier to use. But here's the file that we're pulling down. And we've got that file now. All right. And then I'm going to do an LL. And notice here's my file. But one thing you'll also notice here is that it doesn't have executable permissions. And so you're going to need that. So what I usually do at this point is just I do a change mod 777, which means everybody has the right to run this, to read it, write it, or execute it. I'm going to delete the file when we're done anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And by the way, I know I'm running this all as root. There's some join that has pretty strong opinions on that subject. Normally I would set up a Mirth user and do this as Mirth where I can, and then run the service as root. But for the purposes of getting through this today, we're going to run this as root. So with that, I'm going to change the permissions on that folder. So now if you look, I've now got owned by root. It's got read, write, executable, owner, group, world. So that means the owner can read, write, execute, the group can read, write, execute, and the world can read, write, execute. That is pretty much anyone that has access to this file can do whatever they want to do with it. So with that, do /mirth tab, and that's going to give me the 3.6.2 shell, and I'm going to run the installer. Okay, so this is going to install Mirth Connect on my computer. It's okay, and now we're going through the license, and I want to just touch real quick on the Mirth Connect license. Mirth Connect is licensed under MPL, which is a copyleft open source license. And what this means is you can use it in your product, you can use it as part of your product, you can use it, embed it, whatever you need to do, whatever you would like to use this product for, they're giving you license to do it. But what they do say with the copyleft is if you modify it, then you have to release that modification as part of an open source release. So just be aware of the requirements under MPL 1.1. And this is just forcing me to go through the MPL license. And one point here while we're going through this is this larger work clause. And you should be aware of that as well. When I talked about embedding it earlier, if you embed this product and you modify it, there could be implications to your license. And so just be aware that there are some with MPL 1.1 there are some requirements, particularly if you embed it as a part of a larger work. But with that, I'm going to leave the licensing to the attorneys and just get through this. So I'm going to accept the agreement, yes, 1, and then hit return. Okay, so first question it's asking me is where should Mirth Connect be installed? And it's actually changed. At one time it was opt Mirth Connect, and now they've moved it to user local Mirth Connect, and this is new with I think 3.6.2. You know what? I don't like that. I like to stay with where it was, which is opt Mirth Connect. And so I'm going to hit return. So that's going to install in that folder. And then it's asking me what do you want installed, and I want everything installed. So I'm going to say X, 2, 3. So I want the server manager, and the command line interpreter installed. And then it's asking me if I want to create SIMlinks. And what this means is if you can create SIMlinks to the user local bin folder and essentially use this as it becomes part of the command line, and I do like that. So I'm going to say, yeah, I want that. And it's saying, well, where do you want the SIMlinks created? Normally they're done into user local bin. And that should be part of your path, so you should be able to get access to those. So if you enter the commands, they should just execute. It's asking you what port you want it running on. And I usually take default. And then this goes through a series of security questions. I normally take default there as well, but just be aware you can change this or modify this however you'd like. And this is talking about the password for the Mirth users that you may add. And then it's asking me where do you want your Mirth your application data to go, and I'll just say data, opt Mirth Connect data. and then where you want your logs to go. Now, one thing I want to note about this is the opt Mirth Connect logs and opt Mirth Connect data. It doesn't really matter where you put it. You can symlink it and create an external file system or whatever you want, and just add a pointer to this folder. I've done that in the past, so that's possible as well. And I'm going to enter yes. I do want to install it. So it's going through and it's installing the files. So this is going easy because I've done the homework, but in the past I've spent 3 or 4 days on this, and it can be really painful at times. So finishing the installation. So then if we cd, I'm going to clear the screen. And if we cd to opt Mirth Connect now, you'll see some files. Here's your data folder, and then here's your logs folder, and that's the location of, you'll use that a lot, which is the logs folder. Okay, now we've got Mirth Connect installed and we've got Postgres installed, but by default Mirth Connect runs with Derby, which is not recommended for use in I would say any environment, most particularly a production environment. So never use Derby. Well, how do you change that? If you look here, I have a folder called conf, which is the configuration. If you look in the configuration folder, several files. The one we care about is the Mirth.properties file. You'll notice there's some of the things that we said earlier is actually built out here now in this configuration file. So it's under the comp folder. It's called Mirth.properties. And this is a huge gotcha here. They've got a lot of options, and it can really hose you up. It hosed me up last night. Spent a couple hours troubleshooting where I just had a fat finger. I'll actually just show you that now. I will own it. And I've been doing this for years and made this error. Right here, I normally do copy paste. This cost me about 2 hours last night. Forgot to put that in right there. I left it as Derby, and then I fixed that after just a few minutes. And then I did a copy paste of the URL to the driver, but I forgot to put the database.url in front, so I just had this command to the right, and it started giving me errors. So I worked on that and how I troubleshoot, and I'm going to go through a troubleshooting section, but that's went to the logs folder. Oh, that's under Mirth. Anyway, I went to the logs folder and found the error, but it wasn't very descriptive, and so it took a long time to actually get through this. And this is just another test machine I'm going to destroy after this session's over. So here we've got Derby, and what I like to do is never change the actual line, leave the default. So I'm going to type in database equal Postgres. All right. And then I'm going to go here, and here's a mistake I made last night. I grabbed this and I copied it, did an insert here, and I pasted it, and I pasted it just like that. Well, that's wrong. And 2 hours later, I figured out what I'd done. Alright, so there you go. So now you're changing it from the default, which is Derby, here, and you're changing it now to Postgres. So it's saying don't use the Derby driver, use the Postgres driver. And here's that port that I was talking about earlier. I'm saying it's localhost, this colon says look at it for a port, and there's your port number. All right, and then I'm saying here, options, these are your options. This is what's supported. And Postgres is one of those options. So I've got that here. And this is in the Mirth.properties file. And then I have to enter a username and password. And there's Mirth servers all over the world with the username and password of Mirth and Mirth. Promise you that. All right. So with that, I will save this file. And now we've made the changes to move Mirth.properties to point at the Postgres install that's on this server and is running right now. What we don't have is Postgres, the work with Postgres done. So I'm going to bring up PGAdmin now because it's easier to do it with PGAdmin. All right, so what I've just done is I've moved the Mirth.properties folder to point at this alternate server, which is what I have right here. All right, and I'm going to say, all right, and I'm going to call that database MirthDB1, and say the Mirth is the owner. I'm going to save it. So now I've just created another database on an alternate server called MirthDB1. Anyone have any questions about what I've just done? All right, so that database is available now. And what I should be able to do at this point is go back to the command line. Go up one folder. So now I'm in the opt Mirth Connect folder. I'm going to do an ls. Give me the commands that are out there, and I'm going to run the MC service command. I'm going to say give me the status right now. Okay, it's running, but it's running against Derby because I haven't restarted it. And it's using the old Derby system. So I'm going to say MC service stop. And it stopped it. Now it's going to reload Mirth.properties with the new command parameters that we've given Mirth.properties. So it's starting right now. All right. Okay, so now it's running. Now what happens is, notice here that the activity on this MirthDB1, what it does when you run it for the first time is it actually creates the tables that it needs, and it spins up the basic schema. So all you have to do is create the database. It will do the rest. And so now I have MC service running on this node, and bonus here, you now see it running MC service on two separate nodes. So I've got the database server running on one node, and I've got the application server running on an alternate node. Now, if we had an hour for me to troubleshoot what's going on with the Postgres user, I would have it running on the same node, and so you would see the demo server out here, and you would see the only one single database here, and MirthDB would be under the new server that I just created. Instead, I just spun up a second database on this server I spun up last night, and I've got the MirthDB running, MirthDB1 running now, and I've got this pointing at MirthDB1. And let's see what happens. Yep, there we go. So now we got Mirth Connect up. And then we're going to launch the Mirth Connect Administrator. So this is one little thing that I want to make note on, and that is I'm going to keep this. And my Mac's not going to open it. I'm going to have to tell it to open. Just 1 second. All right. And right, sorry for the interruption. Okay, so I had a package delivered. Murphy's Law. All right, so we had talked about the file. So let's just go find that real quick. I'm just going to drag that up here. And if you open the file, it's going to give me an error. So this is a JNLP. With version 3.7, they're going to do away with this, and I think that's gone now. So it's not letting me open this, and it's just it's a Mac thing. So and I can actually tell it to open this. So open anyway. Now it's trying to open. Let's see what it does. So here we go. All right, and then the default password, which you would want to change, is always admin, so it's admin. Notice here, and you can actually change this IP address once you get that JNLP loaded. Got here 362. It is dependent, so if you're going to run 362 on the server, you have to run it on the client. So you'd have to have multiple JNLPs on your desktop. And loading the extensions. It's always slow in the first load, and we're almost done. And there you go. That's where you have a chance to change your password. And Mirth Connect's up and working. So that will conclude the webinar for today. Webinars, you can communicate with us off of the MCUG website and or off of Twitter. So feel free to reach out to us in either method. And I'm also thinking of putting a ask a question out there. Of course, that might be overkill on Slack. They have capabilities to do that over at Nextgen, so I'm not sure that it's really required to do that. But anyway, I just want to increase the ability for us to communicate with you guys, and for us to have some method for getting feedback from you. And also, if there are enhancements that you want to get over to Nextgen, I'd love to have, I know there's Jira and there's other ways of doing that, but if we come to Nextgen as a group instead of as individuals, I think we'll have a little more ability to have some influence with Nextgen on enhancements they're doing for Mirth. So with that, I'm going to conclude this webinar. Thank you for your time. I appreciate everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful day.